Let's get things started. Hey guys, Hattopy here. There's a lot of Pokemon to pick from. We've almost hit 1,000 different monsters over all the games that have come out. So it really frustrates me when people ask me, what's your favorite Pokemon? Not necessarily the question itself, it's just that it's so hard to pick one. There's just so many to go through. There's a reason why the game tells you to always try to have a balanced team. So today I wanted to just make a quick little video on something a little bit different, and I hope that you guys will play along as well in the comments below. I want to list my favorite Pokemon within each of the 18 different types, in no specific order. But first, some rules. Firstly, by picking one Pokemon, I'm effectively picking the entire evolution line. It's going to shrink in the list a little bit, it's going to make it a little bit more manageable. Second, for those of you playing at home, you can pick legendary Pokemon if you want. For me, you're going to find a distinct lack of them on my list just because I kind of like normal Pokemon rather than legendaries. But if you want to have a legendary or 2 or 18 on your list, then by all means. Third is going to be more specific to me, but I'm going to have honorable mentions listed as well. I'm not going to really talk about them. If you guys want to do some as well, then by all means. I just know that will be like a lot of typing, but that's up to you. And finally, my most technical rule. Dual types can obviously win in a certain typing, but if it does win for one type, it can't compete for the other, just to add a little bit of variety to my list. If you need an example, look no further than my favorite normal type Pokemon, Heliolisk. I really don't like normal type Pokemon all that much, so I knew that skimming the Pokedex to find one would be pretty hard, especially a pure normal type. So instead we have Heliolisk. It's got a really cool design, and I do like my electric type Pokemon, and especially in the overpowered state that my Greninja and my Charizard were in my first playthrough of Pokemon X, Heliolisk still ended up being a Pokemon that I would end up going back to on numerous occasions depending on the situation at hand. For fighting types, Generation 4 certainly dominated in this category, with the ultimate winner going to Lucario. They just look so dang cool and have a really unique playstyle compared to any of the other fighting type Pokemon out there. You can probably already tell that my list is going to be a lot of style over power situations, although a lot of that kind of correlate with each other, but just bear with me. I'm hoping I'll surprise you. For my flyer of choice, there's quite a few to go through, though I ultimately landed on Charizard. There's already another fire type that won me over, so when Charizard ended up being narrowed down on this list, it felt right to add them here. For poison typing, a lot of the earlier generations never really had one that I liked a whole lot. Later generations end up fixing that, with Salazzle taking the winning spot here. They have a really cool design, have a fantastically cool typing at poison and fire, have an ability that can poison any Pokemon typing ever, which is awesome for going against steel and other poison types. And it's kind of funny too, because it kind of correlates into my real world situation, since I have a red belly newt, which looks kind of a lot like them. If you've seen my favorite fire starters list, then you already know what I'm going to say. If not, just know that Typhlosion is my absolute favorite fire type Pokemon, and for the longest time was even my absolute favorite Pokemon in general, if you had ever asked. They aren't particularly strong in battle, but they have a design that's both just super simple but really smart, and it was just always so hard to pick any other starter whenever I did a Generation 2 playthrough. Much of the same applies to my favorite water type as well. Swampert has always been a favorite of mine whenever I played through Generation 3. Unlike Typhlosion though, I find that they have a lot more usefulness and utility in battle. Now here's where my rules kind of come to haunt me a little bit, and I wanted to just mention this real quick. Greninja's always been a favorite of mine, but since Swampert won, he's not going to win for this, and as you're going to find out very soon, he's not going to win for my dark type either. Sorry, buddy. Ever since its inclusion in Generation 2, Dark-type Pokemon have always been a favorite of mine. They always have some really cool designs, they're usually fairly strong in battle, And most dark type moves are great on not just dark type Pokemon, culminating in what ended up being my absolute favorite, Drapion. Scorpions are never not cool, and in every Generation 4 playthrough that I do, I always go way out of my way to get a Skorupi as soon as I possibly can. And what's great too about Drapion is that its only weakness is the ground type, making it a surprisingly reliable tank as well. But speaking of ground types, rounding down my list for this took a little bit since there was actually quite a few to go through. I ended up settling on another Generation 3 near permanent member, Flygon. Easily overshadowed by Garchomp most of the time. Honestly, I like Flygon's design quite a bit more, and although Garchomp I find is a bit more stronger in most areas, Flygon I find has a lot more utility to it, being able to learn stuff like Fly and having a more balanced stat approach, which is great for most of my casual playthroughs. Keeping pace, Dragon types have never really been a type that I used a whole lot, since most of the time they end up showing up like way too late in most of the games. So when I was doing one of my X and Y post-game playthroughs, I ended up catching a shiny Skrelp on one of my chain fishing sessions, which I then transferred over to my next full playthrough of Pokemon Y. And just like Heliolisk, Dragalge ended up being one of those Pokemon that I end up going back to a lot, even in the state of overpowered starter Pokemon. And its typing of Poison and Dragon, as well as its heavy emphasis on the water typing as well, makes it fairly powerful. Ice types as well has never really been a type that I've gotten to use a whole lot as well. They have shown up earlier in some later generations, which is where Aurorus comes into play. Amora just looks so dang adorable, and what's really cool is that with the first time it evolved into Aurorus, you end up hearing this. Beautiful. Easily my favorite cry out of all the Pokemon. It just sounds so majestic, just like its design. For my grass pick, following suit with the other starter Pokemon, Torterra has always been a favorite of mine whenever I play through Generation 4. It has a really cool typing, really neat design, and learning Earthquake at level 32 earlier than any other Pokemon, or even access to a TM at certain points of the game, always makes it a good time to play as. Picking any starter in Generation 4 is a great time though. Because I have to go with Torterra for my favorite grass type, it means that Decidueye can't win that, so it'll win for the ghost type instead. Just like most other dark type Pokemon, I find I get a lot of mileage out of ghost type Pokemon. And although Decidueye was my second choice when I was going through Generation 7, it ended up being my favorite of the three, as Decidueye has a really cool design, has the only Z move that I like, which is saying something, has a fantastic signature move, as well as great stats overall for all of its other attacks. And although I still kind of wish it retained its grass flying typing, Grass Ghost is still really good too. For the longest time, rock types have been largely unimpressive to me. A lot of them have some really cool designs, but most rock and steel type moves don't complement them very well. So it was great in Generation 7 when we finally got a Pokemon like Lycanroc. More specifically, its Dusk form. It has some fantastic speed, allowing it to utilize a lot of its rock type moves very well, and can couple with a lot of different other types of attacks as well. Its midday form also looks really good too, although I don't really like its midnight form all that much, but overall, Dusk form is way better. As for my steel typing, there was a few to go through, but I ultimately settled on my one and only legendary on this list, Solgaleo. Lunala looks pretty good too, although personally I like Solgaleo's design a little bit better. And with how integrated into Generation 7's story Solgaleo is, it was hard not to feel even the slightest bit attachment to Nebby. Now, bug types by and large usually make up a large portion of the early games in most generations, meaning that you'll probably find something early on that you might really like. So of course, for my favorite bug type, I picked the one that's probably the hardest to acquire early in any of the games. Scizor can learn so many awesome slash-based moves, has a really spanking design, as well as probably one of my favorite Mega Evolutions as well. If you're really lucky, you still can acquire it early in Generation 2 if you manage to find a Magnemite holding a metal coat. But I'm usually not quite that lucky, and even if I am, it's a matter of finding someone to trade with. Or in my Heart Gold playthrough's case, I just trade with myself. I apologize to those out there with arachnophobia, although this is for my favorite electric type Pokemon, but regardless. Galvantula is just way too cool. It's got this really neat design. I love it so much. It's really fast. It's not overly strong, but it's just always been so helpful in all my Generation 5 playthroughs. And I remember my first time playing through Pokemon White when I finally caught Zekrom, and it asked if you want to keep it in your party. Well, I kind of had to take Galvantula out since I kind of replaced Electric with Electric, and surely regretted that move since Zekrom blows when you first use it in the Pokemon League. I've always liked Psychic type moves, just usually not the Pokemon that can naturally learn it. With Malamar though, there's quite a lot to appreciate. Inkay can evolve into Malamar by holding your 3DS upside down, which is just hilarious. Malamar itself has a really cool, sinister design to it. It's usually quite strong, and can learn a nice wide variety of moves. And if you're lucky enough to get one with Contrary as its ability, then any debuffing effect that it gets turns into a buff, or vice versa, but I'll explain in a second. It means that Malamar can naturally learn Superpower, so every time that it uses it, instead of its attack and defense going down, it actually goes up, which is fantastic for me since I don't really use a whole lot of status affecting moves in my casual playthroughs. And to finally round out my list is the newest typing, the Fairy typing. Now, I found it kind of hard to pick one since most of the older Pokemon that got converted to Fairy typing never really tickled my fancy all that much, so I end up having to stick to a lot of the new ones, landing eventually on Primarina. Primarina's design is actually really good, not so much Brionne's, but Popplio and Primarina both look really good. It can learn some really fantastic moves, as well as having access to a personal move and a personal Z move, which might be something you might like. Fairy typing is still kind of in a flux state, though. It's still not one I've really settled on yet, just because it's been too early. But regardless, that's all of them. Make sure you guys leave a comment down below discussing your own list or what you thought about mine. I know my list was a lot about its style rather than anything else, which might be something that would turn you guys off, but regardless, I would love to see what you guys thought. Maybe there was some on here that surprised you, or some that did not surprise you at all, or maybe some that you're just downright disgusted is on here. Regardless, I would love to be able to discuss with you guys about your lists and also about mine. But anywho, thank you all so much for watching. If you like what you saw, you can click right up here to check out some of my other videos that I've done, or if you really feel like it, you can click right up here to subscribe. And until next time, guys, I will see you all later.